The Silk Tunnel Initiation. A closet Buddhist from birth, I have seized every opportunity to participate in any spiritual rite, food fast or initiation, beginning with my first Cub Scout pin, several baptisms, and autographs from the spiritually developed. An initiation is a pilgrim's rite of passage, sometimes in the physical or in the metaphysical sense, or both. Most initiations in physical sense are ceremonial, symbolizing transformation of the old way of life into a new, better, richer life fulfilled. In the physical sense, initiation into any order, say the secret rites of Masons, Rosicrucians, or a deep, full-body dunk baptism of the Christian group of the same name, symbolize a transformation that has already happened in the spiritual sense or at the same time of the ceremony in the metaphysical sense. My most profound spiritual initiations have been those of a secret nature. At the time, I did not know the initiation was taking place in any sense. Ceremonial rites of passage are important to mark a special time or place, which is a symbolic trigger eidetic, able to recall or reproduce things previously seen with startling accuracy, clarity, and vividness. And my better half announced that she was staying in Guangzhou, China, referring to me as Johnny, and rightfully nicknamed my younger travel companion, Haji, refused to travel along with us on our spiritual quest to Lhasa, Tibet. She was comparing the two of us with the young travelers of the 1960s Saturday morning cartoon, Johnny Quest, produced by Hanna-Barbera. We landed on a clear November day on the outskirts of the city and were driven by jeep for an hour up high mountain passes before we breached the summit of the valley where lay the majestic Potala Palace towering over the mountains in the background. We unpacked at our hotel and were invited to visit the palace the next morning. The next day, we were escorted by two holy Buddhist monks to the basement of the Potala Palace, an endless stairway deep into the dark center of time immortal, where still stood the original two seats of power, the homes of the Dalai Lama and the government regent, who were once ruled side by side. Potala Palace is built over these two foundations, complete with two small houses, or I should say homes, with windows and doors, and even a garden in front of each that was bare for lack of sunlight in the basement of the palace. Although the garden was bare from lack of sunlight, it was well groomed, and both homes were well attended to as if they were still occupied. Huge timbers that most have been carried over the Himalayan mountains by teams of horses or perhaps slaves stretch high over the ceramic tile roofs of the original seats of power, a home for the spiritual Dalai Lama and one for the government regent. Potala Palace is built on or over these two foundations. Could not tell it now or when I was visiting in 1992 because the size of the palace is so massive. No one would think that it was built one stick at a time over the original two seats of power. The basement is like a huge auditorium, empty, just a shell and shelter to two homes. After our short visit, the two monks escorted us back to the long wooden stairway to sunlight. My traveling companion and I had just reached the summit of the staircase and stretched up from the basement of the Winter Palace in Lhasa, Tibet. Two young barefoot monks, aged 14 at the most, who were wearing socks that the bottoms had worn through, jump us and rattle on about a silk tunnel ceremony and that we are fortunate to arrive at the right time for the fun. I was dumbfounded by the chatter until my Chinese friend translated Mandarin from our Tibetan mountain guide, who translated Tibet to Chinese from the young pilgrims. The young Tibetan monks led us to a room with a tall open door at least 10 feet tall and 4 foot on center. Just over the threshold lay a silk tube 36 inches in diameter with Chinese dragon embroideries on the side, which they called the Silk Dragon. The silk tunnel snaked throughout the dark room and into side channels as appeared from above. I wondered, how many silkworms and how many years passed to produce the silk tunnel? My thoughts were interrupted by screams of horror, with an occasional fear-deafening laugh bellowing from the dragon. The two young monks pushed forward as our knees bended down to crawl into the dragon, but I did not really understand which end we were entering into or if it was any significance. First, the mountain guide, then Haji, set off crawling as I followed with the realization that if you do not ride the lead elephant, the view is always the same. We began crawling on all fours as Screaming Dragon Initiate squeezed by us with horrified, claustrophobic faces. Throughout the tunnel, we had to make decisions at crossroads stitched into the sides of the dragon. Our mountain guide did not do so well if the third guy in line had to back up and make the decision on which route, which was always away from the screaming voices. Like mice that finally find the cheeses at the end of the maze, an initiate stuck his head in a hole too small for the body and jet past us to the entrance screaming. We all challenged each other to stick our heads in the hole, laughing as if we knew it was a joke, but the screams told us something different. I was pushed up against a side, and a tear revealed what was on the other side. A yellow hat monk with what looked like a freshly sharpened Japanese samurai sword would raise the blade, and as a head stuck through, he would bring it down with force as to remove the head with one swing. From what I had seen, he was not a very good shot. We all dared each other and turned around to go back several times. Then Haji got a bold look on his face and stuck his head in. At that distance, I could see a shadow silhouette outline of a raised sword on the tunnel's sides coming down onto Haji's neck. The swordsman missed again as Haji jet past me to the entrance with a horrified look on his face. Finally, I crawled forward and stuck my head in as the Tibetan swordsmen backed off and were replaced by the largest feet I have ever seen as my eyes slowly followed up dragon silk trousers held up by a rope to a mountain of a monk with a big wide smile looking back at me. I sat there on all fours gazing at the shining countenance of the high spiritual initiate, then slowly crawled backward, turning, making my way back to my companions. Years later, I understood that I had earned the right on that day by the way of the Silk Tunnel initiation for that next step on the path on my spiritual journey, thanks to 2 barefoot boy monks in Lhasa, Tibet. November 1992. Lhasa, Tibet. Gregory N. Odell.